Welcome aboard the USS Aeronome. To become a member of our crew, please visit perfectorganism.com/support. As a patron of Perfect Organism, you'll receive exclusive perks and early access to content. Incoming audio transmission received. Please proceed to Subdeck 3 to begin playback. Thank you, and welcome aboard.
I think we ought to discuss the bonus situation.
Right.
Brett and I, we think we deserve full shares, right, baby?
You see, Mr. Park and I feel that the bonus situation is good.
Move! Get out of there! Don't you move! Dad! Move, Dad! Move, Dad! Get
Welcome to Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast. I am your host, Jamie Prater, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Patrick Green. How's your face feeling, Jamie?
Feeling really good and smooth.
Good. It's feeling really smooth, exfoliated.
Exfoliated.
I'm proud of you.
With love.
Jamie was doing some skincare before we started recording tonight. So this is a loot.
Cocky skincare kid.
Two episodes in a row. I'm excited we're back to talk about engineers tonight. And we have this great roundtable who is here congregated late at night, I must say. Thank you, everybody, for doing that.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
I think we're all pretty much in the same time zone, except for Jamie, who's over in the fucking...
No, Perry's... I think you're in Central, aren't you?
Yep.
So it's 9:30 for him, almost?
To be fair, that's still pretty late, so that counts, Perry. We'll give you that. But...
Late for
Thank you.
Late for a parent.
But yeah, we're here tonight.
Yes, we are. Just want to go around introducing everyone. This is a round table, first of all, a part 2 of our engineers discussion. We just felt like it was a good time to bring everybody in and talk about these creatures that were engineered. No, they were created for Prometheus. Are they successful? Are they not? Do they work? Is there a greater mythology? Do they work as the space jockey? All those kinds of questions that me and Patrick covered that sort of went off into these strange other discussions, which were really interesting. So first guest is reoccurring Hive Mind host and founder, Dave Gogol. Thanks for coming on.
No problem. Always happy to be here. The guest experience is always a good time.
Yes,
yes. You get the VIP guest.
That's right.
Because you're not really a guest. You're
he has the special like spot in Zoom. That spot where he is reserved for
sweep it out. You know,
it's been COVID prepared.
That's right.
Our next guest and part of our team on Perfect Organism is Maj. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, everybody.
Maj takes care of IG. All of our almost 8,000 followers on IG. Hello. Thanks for coming on, Maj. Maj and I hosted a kind of a mini episode a couple weeks ago. What did we talk about? I don't even remember.
Talked about tropes of the alien universe.
That's right. That was a good conversation.
Apparently not good enough to remember.
Well, yeah.
How do you not remember? I remember. I wasn't even on.
I remember it.
I'm busy.
I'm just kidding. No, it was a terrible conversation.
We had all 2 viewers, which is true. Perry was one of those viewers too, I think.
Oh,
Perry?
yeah. I watched the whole thing.
Welcome to the show, Perry. Thanks for coming on again. I think this is your second time.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Happy to be here. Love it, you guys.
Perry, did they talk about tropes? Can you verify that that's actually what happened?
We talked about drapes.
They sure did.
Drapes! I knew it was something like that.
Tropes and drapes.
Ropes.
We talked about traipsing and
ropes and knots.
Traipsing through the forest. Hey, quick shout out. I'm going to do one of those also with Madge in like a week, I think. So we're doing those semi-regularly now on Instagram. If you don't follow us, make sure you do.
Yeah,
we're gonna be,
we might just go live.
We might just go live. And you know what's going to happen.
Whoa.
So how do we want to set this up, Patrick?
Let's talk about the engineers. I don't know.
Yeah, this is a very free-form, freewheeling.
Okay, so let's just...
I have a way to kick
What was your first thought of the engineers?
Hang on.
Wait,
Dave Gogol. Dave Gogol. So
why, yes, Patrick Green.
You
How
came
may I
up
help
on
you
the
on this particular
last
podcast?
So the engineers run.
What are you inquiring?
This is something I know you are very into. It's something that you've written blog posts about. It's something that we talked about in the last episode.
I've never seen the movie.
A passion of yours. Give us like your overall connection to the engineers and what you think about them.
Sure. I guess when I first saw Prometheus, um, I always loved the space jockey just from seeing Alien and diving into the comics. That was always a favorite story of mine, seeing all the different theories, all the comics and books had, and then when I actually saw it on the big screen, I'm expecting this funky alien, and then there's some guy in a suit. I was like, what the? I wasn't a fan. But then as I kind of got to think about it and watch the movie a couple times, I'm like, you know what? This is pretty dope. Because actually seeing some of those creatures on the big screen, it might have come off a little cheesy or corny, but I thought the way they did it worked because not only did they look, as Jamie said, they look iconic. The design and the movements are awesome. The cool little like blue hue to them, they were terrifying and a bit underutilized and since, which we could get into later, I guess. But I thought they're awesome, and you could, even if you're not a fan of them per se, you could think, hey, all right, these guys are intimidating the actual space jockeys, or whatever you choose to believe. And I think they're great. I think they're a great addition to the franchise and the mythos, and it really expands it in a way that works. They're really do a good job of introducing another element, a non-alien yet alien element to the franchise.
Perry, what do you think? You've been watching the Furious Gods documentary.
Yeah.
That 8-hour documentary.
Yeah, which is great, by the way. I highly recommend it. Even if you weren't a super big fan of Prometheus, the Furious Gods documentary is as you guys know, it's amazing. Yeah, I think for me, Dave, a little bit similar to you. I mean, the space jockey in the Derelict was such a big mystery when I was a kid and watching the Alien movies and just always, that was the big mystery is who was that guy? What happened? Where's the thing that came out of his chest? What that whole discovery and wanting to know what the backstory there was huge for me. So Prometheus off the bat was I guess I liked it. I really loved the engineers idea as far as that aspect of the film. There's still some things Jamie, I know you and I had chatted with a little bit about that, just are that aren't as great about the film, but that doesn't knock the whole idea of the engineers and just something that I've been wrestling with just watching Prometheus over again. And I think what's so cool about just some things I've read is like we came from them, or that's like sort of the idea is that they would go around and create these life on other planets, and it's just adds this extra layer, like with the black goo and how they are able to create and destroy. And it's like, I think of it as like us, their spacecrafts in the black goo is like our atomic bomb, right? Like we go and can wipe out a whole civilization with one bomb. And granted, these beings are so much more godly or whatever, transcend like our thinking of what that might be, warfare, whatever, and they use it in this completely different, absolutely scary way where you're like, oh my god. And so even if that is what it is, but it's just like, you're like, wow, you're like, we're like bugs to them, sort of, when you think about it. And so like the whole scene where like David goes in there, Waylon goes in, and they try to talk to the engineer, and he doesn't say anything, but then he just like almost kills everybody and is like gonna escape. That whole scene was what I really enjoyed about Prometheus, and just the aesthetics and everything like that. I loved it. And so yeah, I think there's so much more there to explore, and what could have been, or what maybe could be for future films if they go to explore that. But yeah, generally definitely pleased with the engineers and that whole idea behind it, because I still creeps me out, and it's still like, when I think of it like that, like they could go to other planets and either wipe them out or create life, or if they didn't like what they created, it was almost like they were, like we're a game, or we're like just a byproduct of something they're trying to create, or whatever.
It's a scary thought,
Totally.
Yeah. Mass, what you got?
The engineers, they're absolutely iconic in their own right. They're scary. They're some of the best makeup effects put in a movie, period. They're also kind of like the embodiment of for me, being able to simultaneously have two opposing viewpoints, I guess. The big gripe of like, oh, the space jockey was just a guy in a suit and da da da, like that'll always still there's a whatever, that's a poor way of putting it. There's always going to be part of me that's going to value the mystery more than the answers. But the thing is, I'll end up sitting there thinking about the engineers and all the implications about them and the black goo for so long, that then I look up and I'm like, do I love this though? Like, isn't this like so awesome to think about? And yeah, I don't know, just them as a conception, from where they came from or what purpose they were trying to serve, and how successful they were overall, as an addition to the Alien universe, is kind of one thing. But just if you're going to dream up and execute a movie monster, or a sci-fi idea, and commit it to film visually, I don't know, I think they're pretty awesome. I'm just like appreciative of when things are well made in film, or just really something that feels from the imagination, and really had a lot of care put into it. That's how I feel about them, honestly. It just plucked out of everything. And I was watching The Furious Gods earlier too, just to like get in the zone and see. And also it was kind of like, do I want to keep watching this, or should I go have a refresher and watch the movie again? And like, is there a difference there? Like, in the end, is it about the document? I think that documentary will make you like the movie more, to be honest. You're like, wow, I mean, how can I be mad at this?
Yeah,
it's almost
100%.
like, right?
Totally.
And you feel all that potential in there, and all the ideas they were swimming in, and you're like, ooh, oh my God, this is like, yeah, this is everything we want out of a movie. But it maybe it tried to be
gaslight. Don't let that gaslight you.
Don't.
Oh yeah,
Don't listen to
Stockholm
Jamie.
syndrome,
Right?
yeah.
the doc's like, I'm sorry, baby. Come on, I'm sorry. Here, watch this doc. It's you'll be so inspired again.
It was good, was it? Yeah, we know it was good. Yeah.
Watch it again, and then I'll watch it
Holloway's the
again.
best character in this movie.
Oh my God. You know what sunk Prometheus a little bit, I think, is because like it has also, what's a really great thing about that documentary? It really kind of shows a viewer what it means that hundreds of people work on a movie, because you can look at the credits and that just washes over you, and like, but that documentary is so long, and it talks to so many people, that you kind of understand the different circles of people that work on a film, and how many people are needed, and how much work they put in, and what their work day is like and stuff. And like, it almost makes halfway, partway through the thing, I'm like, it's a miracle like this could ever come out good. Like, this is nuts. Like, everyone is coming to it, with their own thing and all that. But yeah, I lost my train of thought. But yeah, overall, I think the engineers are cool. They still, it's almost like the ideas in Prometheus and all that. It's like I still wrestle with them in a way of like, I encountered them on a path and we're having a stare down, and I haven't like walked on and been like, all right, cool, like I understand, and I walk on. I'm just like still stuck, like still trying to work it out. And that's what makes movies last, but it's also what can make movies frustrating. So it's again, it comes back to that like dichotomy. Like I love them and they frustrate me a little bit just because, but but not solely the engineers unto themselves. But yeah.
Well, speaking of frustrations, if I could jump in for a moment, something
Please.
that came up quite a bit on the last one was this notion of answers to questions that you didn't necessarily want answered, or what may or may not have been answers to questions you wouldn't have wanted answered. And I remember when we put some conversations in Building Better Worlds on this, a lot of people responded by saying, "I don't like the engineers because they ruin the space jockey for me," something to that effect. Jamie and I have kind of pretty nuanced opinions on that. I personally have gone back and forth quite a bit on that, and I know that my initial feeling was significantly more negative than it is now, especially since seeing the documentary that Charles de Lauzirika made, Furious Gods, or by doing this series with everybody. I've had time to kind of stew in that and think about what I really feel. But I'd love to hear from you guys, kind of rapid fire. Like, did this ruin the mystery for you, or like, how did you feel when you saw what was or not in the chair in the first film?
Before
Not
people
for me.
answer, I just want to say that I was sold on the engineers when I saw the trailer, and you see something standing in front of Shaw, and that's whatever that trailer was, and she's screaming, and it cuts, and it's the end of the trailer. I remember thinking, what is standing in front of her? Because you just see his legs, and of course, I think he's 7'2", right, Barry?
Yep.
Ian
White, who plays
Yeah.
the engineer, and that just ominous figure standing in front of her, mirroring sort of what the Xeno would do, was terrifying to me. I thought, okay, these things are cool. Anyways, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, it didn't at all. Like I said, at first it did, but I think it just brought new mysteries and new questions, because then what were these engineers about? Were they trying to, were they trying to transport the alien? Were they trying to create them? Did they recreate them? Are they copying the space jockeys? Are they like some rogue race? I thought it brought out even more. I thought it really did a good job, just adding on to a different part of the alien universe. And again, it's a shame we didn't get to see more of it, but I don't think at all it ruined the space jockey, because I could still read the comics and talk about it, and I'm not thinking, oh gosh darn it, that Prometheus movie ruined it all for me. It doesn't. It hasn't ruined a thing, and that's arguably one of my top 2-3 things to talk about in the alien, the whole alien family, is the space jockey. It hasn't ruined a thing for me.
I'll jump in off that, Dave. Same for me. At first I was a little, I guess, frustrated too, and was, because I think I was going into the film already thinking like, oh, this is gonna connect us to the space jockey, and like, oh man, we're gonna see like where this came from, and just watching Furious Gods now, but then in the years before this, just like reading what I was reading about Prometheus and what Ridley Scott's sort of idea behind it was, to not connect the dots there, brought a whole nother level of mystery to me. I wasn't upset really that it was a guy in a suit and things like that, and it just brought so much more mystery to me. And Dave too, I'd loved, that's one of my favorite things as well, as to discuss with people is how that ship maybe crashed there or whatever, however it got there, whatever came out of its chest. Was it still in that ship when Kane and those guys went in there and he got the face sucker on him? Like, was whatever came out of him still in that shit? That always creeps me out thinking about that. But yeah, it definitely heightened the mystery for me. And I don't know, I don't want to I guess speak negatively about, I can see how people would be upset, but I think if you really watch like that documentary and just read a little bit more about the ideas behind what they were trying to create and things like that, you'll just appreciate more what they were trying to present, I think.
I'll say, does it ruin it? No, because to be honest, they are quite separate in my mind in a way. It's almost like Prometheus and Covenant are, Prometheus, especially from watching that documentary, you can tell it's a very brilliant use of source material, which was Alien essentially. And but it's you know, I don't want to be also like derogatory or not derogatory, but
Defamatory?
No. What's
Like bashing.
I need another $5 word,
hater?
guys. No. Reductive. I don't want to be reductive and say it's like fanfic in my mind, much like but it's sort of like I don't know how to say it. I'm not yes, it's the same chair. Yes, it's the same ship. Like I understand, but it's not the same in my mind. I don't know how to put it. That's how I'm I don't know. That's all I need. I'm like, hey, I enjoy this way and I enjoy this way. When I try to put the two together, it's a force for me. So I'm like, why do I, you know, the newer movies, of course, look different. They care about a more expansive world, a more headier ideas. It's like it's a different show. It's a different thing. It doesn't ruin it. It's actually really cool. But and maybe I'll say this to anyone listening who hasn't maybe had this revelation, if you're young, of our teenage listenership,
like a significant preschool listeners.
Yeah,
I do have a 4-year-old who listens to this. So
yeah.
If I hear from one more toddler on the phone, I'm done.
If you have
oh my God, I know.
If you have finished making your TikTok content for the quota for the evening, if you are done with TikTok for the day, and you want to take some free advice from an idiot, here's my advice. Fiction is fiction. It's all fake. I remember being a kid and I would read Batman comics and Spider-Man comics, and if I read one I didn't like or that just felt wrong or was bad or something, I'd be like, oh, this has to be like stricken from the record. What if other people read this? Like, this is bad, right? Like, oh my God, like that's not the real Spider-Man. That's not the real Batman. It's all fiction. It's all just books on a shelf. If you don't, you know, so I don't know. And as an individual book I might pick up off a shelf, Prometheus is pretty cool in a lot of ways, even though, you know, it's laughable in some ways and all that. And that's how I experienced it first, was kind of as a blank, because I was thinking about it and I was like, you know, like I must have been kind of away from the Alien films in my teenage years, and just like it didn't really register, because I remember seeing, for my money, the Prometheus trailer, maybe it's just the time and place, the way it impacted me, it's the best trailer ever, period.
It's awesome.
The best trailer.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
And I saw that in a theater and I didn't care about the movie I was going to watch after, and I don't even remember what it is, but that trailer completely blew my mind. And it's almost maybe because, you know, I had seen Alien and I just kind of forgot, but I was like, what, the elephant thing, that's like, it's like touching something deep in my mind. And like, but just to say,
yeah,
the proboscis. moisturize. So, like it, you know, it should be said, it doesn't get brought up quite enough, maybe it shouldn't get brought up more, because it was a funny time, weird time, when people were like, the rapture's coming, aliens are coming, the Mayans, and like all this stuff. But I remember, you know, a couple of years leading up to 2012, and there was a lot of Mayan talk and apocalypse talk and ancient aliens talk. It was in the zeitgeist in a big way, in my opinion, as in my memory. And I thought that's what that movie was riding on. I saw that trailer. I was like, oh, they're doing like an Ancient Aliens movie. Wow. And I'm a teenager and like the visuals are already amazing. And then it turns scary, really scary. And I was like, it would be scary. This movie looks amazing. I'm going to go watch it. And then I got caught wind that it was like an alien thing. And then the deacon at the end just confused me. Now I'm on a whole other track. But one thing I'll just tack on before I end this rant is, I think now looking back, because, you know, you always come up with new opinions over time, I think the deacon might be one of the more missed opportunities, like in the movie. Like that should have been the ultramorph like they originally intended, and they could have done some the ultramorph, but like
I agree.
You know, something for, you know, a more engineer
looking, like a transformer, doesn't
it? Yeah, that's the first time I think of the transformer thing.
Like I never said that out loud before. I've only seen it written down. You know?
That's funny. I was thinking the same thing. Optimus, the Ultimus ultramorph is back.
Ultramorph.
Get out of there! There's an ultramorph there.
Get down.
Son of a fish.
Patrick and I though discussed that just that what was in the ship in Alien might not. It might be a different form of an engineer. It might be an engineer that was grown into that chair. It might be something different. It looks different. The body shape is different. It's bigger.
But
the
that type
legs,
of but I'm sorry to cut you off, but like that type of conjecture of like, but it's longer. Maybe it's like this slightly different thing, but they're still in the same. Like we know why it looks different. Why? Whatever.
because they retconned it. That's why.
Yeah,
Well,
because
of
our
screwed up the dimensions on the set. You know?
Well, no, but they didn't. Remember when we saw we talked about this too, Patrick, when we saw the statues of the engineers and you see their arms and they're like way long because they have to be to fit in that chair.
Right.
They don't even look right. You don't really, you see flashes of the arms here and there, but those arms are like another arm length longer than they should be to make that chair work, because it doesn't work unless their arms are that long. But I mean, I guess it's conjecture, but they could do something that could to tweak it a little bit so it's not actually an engineer sitting in that chair, or the kind of engineer. Maybe it's a different, and I think maybe this is me grasping for straws, wanting to retain the mystery, because that's what makes that scene so great, was the mystery.
Speaking of different types of engineers, the most I missed opportunities to double segue there is the stuff that was cut in Prometheus, which brings me all sorts of anger boiling over. The rollout. The elder engineers that were cut out were awesome as shit.
Yeah, right.
In the beginning with the robes and handing over the little the goo from when he falls out of himself into the DNA.
Yeah.
It was really cool. That's another layer to this whole thing.
They look just like the thing in Raised by Wolves.
I don't know what TV show you're talking about.
Unfortunately,
it's a system, Jamie. It's all the same universe.
The sequel to Charles in Charge, Raised by Wolves.
It's really taking a weird direction. Now, I want to say,
you're not old enough to know about Charles in Charge.
I knew about Charles in Charge. I had TV Land
as a toddler. In defense of I want to say so, like, you know, we can say it's grasping at straws, we can say it's conjecture, we can say it's headcanon, but what I think it actually is what Madge was alluding to earlier, which I think is a really valuable skill to learn, and it's a skill that I have fought to gain in my life, but now I think I'm getting better at, which is that, like, if something doesn't work for you, it's okay to like discount it and just kind of like move on. And if it doesn't work for you, but you want to kind of engage with it, like look for ways to do it. Knowing full well that like most of the conjecture that we engage in on this show, on Shoulder of Orion and other things in our lives, it's because people like probably fucked up somewhere along the line. Like somebody in the art department did a casting of something and it came out wrong, and they're like, oh, I'll just put it in there anyway. Or somebody did an Easter egg and they kept it, you know? And the reality is that like I think Madge, what you were saying earlier, or maybe Perry, I don't remember who was saying this, but I think it was Madge. You were saying, you know, it's fiction at the end of the day, right? This is all fiction. And like that, and the shit in our heads, how we interpret it, is also fiction. It's the fiction we're telling ourselves because we're fans and because we like it. So to me, like, there's no mystery ruined because the space jockey, you know, looks so different from the engineers that we get, and we also get glimpses of other engineer-like, you know, species in Covenant. And the reality is there just, if the engineers are seeding planets with life and creating us in their own image, if that's what's actually happening in the beginning of the film, which is also never even answered because it never even says it's Earth anywhere. If that's what's happening, then like there would be many races and many different species and subspecies and types of life that would be vaguely humanoid or very vaguely engineeroid, right? That would be slightly different from one another. And so it makes total sense that the space jockey would look different. Like it's probably not the same type of engineer that we see in Prometheus. And the engineer and the Covenant engineer suits that we see are, you know, there's a reason why they would look different from the engineers that we see in Prometheus, because maybe it's not the same ones, you know? So yeah, to me, that's never been a huge issue, but it also, it reminds me of all these, you know, people who, you know, rightly and wrong. I mean, I was one of these for Prometheus, right? I really did not like it when it came out. And it was for me kind of like a little bit of a last straw moment after the AVP films, where I was kind of like, man, I do not like the new stuff that they're doing with this franchise. And I'm just going to like kind of sink back into my original trilogy self. And I'm just going to like live there. Right. And part of why I love Covenant so much is because it's the first thing that kind of took me back out of that space. And in loving Covenant, you know, I kind of went back to Prometheus, and I was like, well, let me kind of like look at it again and use my own headcanon and try to come up with, ways to justify all this stuff happening. And that's also why in the end of Covenant, like I'm not bothered by the xenomorph in that, because to me it's not the xenomorph, right? Like there's a reason it looks and acts different, and it's this, protomorph. Anyway, my point being that I think a really good way for people who have issues with Prometheus, for people who, because again, when we put this in Building Better Worlds, the predominant response was, I don't like the engineers, even though they're cool, because they kind of ruin the mystery for me. The mystery exists in your head. As somebody who's a fan and a consumer of this content, the mystery is yours to keep, right? And it doesn't, nobody else is writing the story for you. At the end of the day, it's your story. Like your relationship with this material belongs to nobody but you. So make it work for yourself. And for me, like that means that it is a fundamentally different being in the chair in the first film. And that chair in the first film is my favorite moment in any film ever made. And it still works for me because it's not the same thing.
Yep.
Isn't that interesting that the engineer, like it's working, it's sort of not working. Like people love the engineer, but they're like, oh, I don't know about if it works in the chair, but it's awesome. That doesn't really happen very much. Usually people are like, no, it doesn't work. But people aren't like that about them. They're like, oh no, these are cool things, but I'm not sure. And I think it's what you're saying, Patrick. I think it's true, but also it's a hard thing because we can say, oh, you can keep that mystery, so that means we're deluding ourselves, because they're in the movie, in the documentary, you see Ridley Scott in his hubris saying, no, I made it. This is what it is. And you're like, okay.
And you see him saying, the reason I'm making Prometheus is to answer the question of who was in the chair. Like, that's the reason he made the movie, right? So, like, from Ridley Scott's interpretation of this mystery, that's an answer. But I'm not Ridley Scott. I'm a person watching it who's lived this for 30 years.
Piggyback over what you're saying, Patrick, there's always arguments, all these forums about canon. It's, listen, there is the by the numbers, by the book, Fox, Disney, Dark Horse canon. There is stuff, but there's nothing wrong with going with what you like, with what you prefer to enjoy it, however the fuck you want to enjoy it. There's nothing wrong with that. Sure, they're going to have their stuff that's official, but that's fine. But you could, whatever makes you enjoy the series more, that's perfectly fine. Like, sure, I don't want to get off a whole rant, but like the whole David could, creating the xenomorph thing, I changed it to something, not changed it, but I went with he's recreating what the engineers did. Sure, you could tell me to go fuck myself and stick with, David, the eccentric android poet, made this beautiful, wonderful Frankenstein creation. That's fine. That's not me. I'm going with something else because for me, I think it's more interesting and it keeps the mystery going. You could do what you want to do. That's fine. That's what there's half a dozen movies with all 6 of them are completely different. We're all not going to agree. There's just go with what works for you. It's really that simple. Don't let anyone tell you, and don't go on forums and lecturing people. Well, you see, this is right. No. Let people like what they like. That's it. Game over, man.
So I'm curious though. Do you guys think the engineer is scary? Is it scary? A scary creature to you?
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah,
terrifying.
Jason Voorhees, Terminator type shit. It's good. It's good.
Yeah, I mean, when it's just staring, like it's just looking at David and everybody that comes into the chamber, and you don't know what it's thinking. You don't. It's a really
very menacing. Very menacing.
It's so Giger. Like it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a lot of
100%.
criticism that Prometheus
100%.
sort of removes that biomechanical aesthetic when in fact it does not. Well, in some respects it does. But then you see this engineer that's right out of Giger's Alien book, where the guy's laying on the ground and it's got the same suit and everything. And I think that's why he works so well, because he is Giger aesthetic as much as Big Chap was. And it's pretty amazing.
I snagged a quote from the documentary. One of the effects guys, sadly didn't grab his name, but he was talking about something pretty much what you just said, Jamie. But he said he was talking about when they were doing screen tests for the first time in full makeup, in the suit, in the 4 hours in the chair for prosthetics, and they were doing screen tests, and the actor, was his name again? Ian White.
Ian White.
He
Yeah.
was freaking out kind of the people on set because he's towering over them. He has these completely void, black void eyes, and he said the effect created the effect we were going for in creating the design of those engineers. No, the effect we were going for in creating the design of those engineers manifested itself in reality, it was deeply unsettling to see something that was kind of superhuman, kind of vacant in the eyes with blackened eyes, looking down at you, kind of upset at you in the way in which it felt almost like an angry father or an angry parent was troubling. That's like, yeah, I don't know. And they are aesthetically like so well done. So yeah, that's Giger. I think that's a strong thing that reflects Giger, is just the fact that they're so precisely, pleasing, aesthetically pleasing, but also not even just like the form they chose to give these engineers and their facial features and everything. I mean, the full design of this pressure suit, the eyes, the brow, just the whole thing. It's a wonderful design, but it is like super creepy and scary because he's so angry from the first minute. You're just like, you're so unsure, and then he just tears his head. I remember being so shocked when he tore off David's head the very first time. I was like, what's gonna happen now? I thought they just went to meet him. They went so far to meet him. Everyone's dead. What happened? And so yeah, they scare the hell out of me still. That scene in the trailer, right, when it's like flashing, and that was one of the parts that made me be like, I gotta go to the theater for this one. I gotta go see that.
Yeah, a big theme in our previous episode was, why is he so angry? Like, he's just like starts pissed and ends pissed, and it's like, what exactly is going on? We have some thoughts on that, but yeah.
I think he's from New York.
We don't know for sure if he's angry. I mean, he seems intent, but like, because he goes after Shaw, but Shaw didn't blow him up. The ship did. But he's probably just going after.
He was intrigued by Shaw.
Yeah.
Like when Shaw was asking the questions.
To show intriguement.
Maybe not right away.
Listen, he got shot at. All right. Yeah.
Once he becomes angry, it's like,
yeah, that's it. You're done.
Yeah.
What's hard, I think, what's really hard to do is to create a creature, a humanoid creature that's otherworldly and scary. I don't really know any other, and to have it be authentically scary and original. I'm thinking of other films, like other sci-fi films, where you see maybe they're like monsters, like in Pandorum, when those creatures come down. Those are pretty scary, but they're not really. They're just a whole different sort of type of humanoid creature. But getting, like, we've seen Close Encounters, and it's kind of neat, but it's also kind of cheesy too. Like, you're like, okay, those are people in leotards waving their hands or whatever they're doing, but the care and the time. Yeah, it's an amazing film. The care and the time that went into creating the engineer and having him be that effective, it's almost impossible to do. It's almost impossible to make something that effective and scary,
that convincing, right?
And beautiful and horrific, all in the same thing. Like, the only other thing that I know that embodies all of those, the Xenomorph, in its own kind of even more grotesque way.
I know what you mean about how convincing it is in a way, just how many visual, creature design characters in a movie are that unquestionable in a way, because it's like, he's really that tall. Like, they just, everything shot so impeccably.
And that's one thing too that I loved that they said about Ridley Scott, is that they kept saying over and over again how most directors, or not most directors, but nowadays, they're spending money on the CGI and the special effects and all that. And Scott is so practical and making everything so real for everybody that it just added so much like more realness to the acting, because they're like actually there in this place. And too, for the makeup and the costuming and everything was just real. They were actually making that, and like that, the art form itself behind that is just what I love about film. It's like looking at a Picasso painting, but you're seeing it happen in real time, and you're watching it, and it's like, wow. And you can, like, it is what it is to you, and you can interpret whatever that means to you. And that's why I love cinema so much, and that the art form itself. But Ridley Scott just nails it every time.
Yeah, the attention to detail, the attention to making it beautiful and terrifying at the same time, and making it. I mean, Prometheus still looks great. You know, it's almost 10 years old now, which is crazy to say, but it still looks like it could have just come out last week.
Yeah.
To an empty theater because everybody has COVID.
Yeah, the movie's absolutely gorgeous.
But it's because a lot of it, like you're saying, Perry, was done in camera. A lot of it was done practically. A lot of it was done with prosthetics. A lot of it was done with real sets. And the engineers, you know, to kind of bridge what you're saying and what Jamie was saying, like part of why I think they held up so well also as a design is because there's so little to them, because like they are so close to being human that you don't have to change. You can change a lot of small things to make a very major aesthetic shift, right? Whereas because they read like they're simultaneously us and very clearly not us, right? Whereas the xenomorph, I mean, which obviously, you know, we all are worship at the altar of the xenomorph, but the xenomorph is a much more complicated, much more Baroque design. There's a lot more going on, right? Yeah, literally, I think we're all wearing alien t-shirts right now. So I think that like that is something else to look at. And I think that with the engineers in particular, you know, I think on our last episode, although again we recorded this 700 years ago, so I'm forgetting, but I think I might have mentioned that part of what's frightening to me about that ending with the engineer is that like you get a sense of almost what it's like if like a human lacks empathy or something, or if a human isn't looking at you as a fellow human, if a human looks at you as a target or as a prey item, and how that's a really frightening thing. I've thought more about that since either saying that or not saying it. Either way, thinking about saying it. And I think that what's frightening about it is that it's being looked at by a human from the standpoint of a non-human, almost. It's sort of like it's the way it looks when, you know, you're just like a creature in the forest, like a deer, and you look down the barrel of a gun and there's a human on the other end of it. And you realize how expendable you are to that being who can basically do whatever they want with you. And you have essentially zero that you can do about it, right? And that's a frightening place to be. And there's so few films that do that, right? I mean, from where I'm sitting, like, and I am a huge monster movie person, as you know, like every monster movie I can think of is basically, you know, we are human in this context and we are at the mercy of something otherworldly, or we're at the mercy of something very clearly that's like a sadistic murderer, like a slasher in a slasher movie, right? This is neither of those things. This is something where we're at the mercy of something that is us and kind of isn't us, and is just clearly stronger and smarter and faster than we are. And when he takes a step, it is four of our steps. Like we are not going to win in a fight. And you know, this is a being that can travel across galaxies and plant life in them. Like we are not going to outsmart this fucking thing on a spaceship. And that to me is a really frightening place to be in. And I'm going to go ahead and go a step further. Hang on. And I'm going to say that, you know, in the original Alien film, we talk at length about how, you know, part of what they were trying to do with the screenplay and what O'Bannon specifically was trying to do was to make men feel uncomfortable, right? With, you know, tropes of you know, male oral rape and things like that, and being, you know, impregnated and playing on a lot of things that men are usually latently afraid of. Like I'm not like actively afraid of giving childbirth in my life, but like I'm sure somewhere in my brain is something that's like that would be frightening, and you know, I don't think about it very much. The engineers do something else, I think, to men, but I'm sure to everybody, which is it makes us feel very I don't want to say it's not emasculated. That's not the word for it. It's something small, almost like so for example, you know, when my wife was doing more theater work, when people still went into, you know, theaters for things, she would always, we had a plan, which is that when she got out of rehearsal, she would pick up her phone and call me, so that when she was walking back to the car, I could be on the phone with her. So she would, you know, if somebody was like approaching her and it was dark out, she would have, you know, a loud voice on the other side of the phone. She'd be talking. It'd be clear that she was like in communication with somebody, like back off. Because as a woman at night in a city, like it can be very, very frightening. And, you know, I've heard millions of horror stories about this. As men, like I have never been on the phone with somebody walking back to my car at night. I've never thought twice. I've never crossed the street. I've never been worried about it. But like an engineer looks like me. An engineer, I mean, kind of, I mean, the physique is a little bit better, but you know what I mean? Like an engineer looks like a man, right? And yet I am smaller and weaker, and I will definitely not win in that situation. And it's a feeling of vulnerability that I think is kind of hard to elicit in men, and specifically not doing it in a way that is like over the top or like overtly like menacing. There's something in the quiet strength and how unclear the motives are that is really, really frightening. That I can't think of other films that really go there. And I think that's part of why The Engineer holds up so well.
The movie, it creates dread. It does create a sense of dread, even though it has, kind of, again, mockable moments or parts that feel like they're, not from the same movie, or they didn't quite make the best decision, or they went, et cetera. But for whatever reason, maybe it's some uncomfortable mix of like, some of these characters aren't really likable and it's kind of making me souring the experience. But on top of it, I'm watching people get torched. There's no levity. And then the world's gonna, get destroyed, and there's no hope for anybody. And the person who, even at whatever expense, whatever cost, spend his whole life to get to the engineers, Wayland, he finally is like, it's almost like, I don't know, that's a real moment of vulnerability. He's really just standing there. Maybe he has a little bit of he has a lot of hubris, but it is sort of hat in hand, like at the end, at the feet of the engineers saying, help me, and doesn't go well. I don't know, maybe there should be something probably to be said that the movie does create like some existential dread.
I was just gonna say too, I know the script and the dialogue isn't one of the most favorite things, but one part that I always love and that just like sometimes will give me chills is when after they first went to the ship and they come back and David is talking to Holloway around the pool table, and he's like asking him like, why'd you make me? And he's like, oh, we made you because we could. And he's like, how disappointing would that be if your maker said the same thing about you? And Holloway just kind of laughs it off. But I'm like, dude, yes. Like, what if that is reality in some way, And that right there, I think, is what that whole idea within that dialogue right there is, Patrick, like you said, from Alien, what like really makes men uncomfortable, that sort of thing. It's like what makes humanity uncomfortable. I think that whole meaning, that spirituality behind that, is just, like shit.
Patrick, to a point that you were making, when they go into the engineer stasis, the room or whatever, or the one is sleeping and they wake him up, you notice everyone's body language. They're all kind of huddled down. They're all kind of bent over, almost like they're bowing, because they've stepped into the room for all intents and purposes of an apex predator, and it is not them. And it's not like a giraffe or an elephant or a gorilla where they don't really give a shit about people. They're kind of like, what are you doing? We're here. And the humans are like, okay, we're going to go somewhere else, and sort of both species parts ways. With the engineer, it's a whole different psychological space that they're in too, because it's clear that they are not in control, and humans, especially men, are always in control. And it's a great moment in the movie. I think that the last 35 minutes of the film is great. It's just the dread, everything that's happening. But really just seeing them cower to the engineer, terrified. They're terrified of this thing. And you don't see that a lot in movies. Most of the time it's that kind of Hudson, like, we can take, but they were all at that moment very smart. They're like, we are not in control of the situation. And it didn't go the way that they wanted to, and it killed a few of them, but it's a great moment to see, to your point, Patrick, not like humans in a space where we are not the most intelligent being in the universe or in the galaxy or wherever we think we're the most intelligent beings of, and it's that dread is palpable.
And that last 35 minutes could have been even better if they didn't cut that final showdown between the engineer and Shaw, which is Ridley Scott should be convicted for a war crime for cutting that out. Instead of this quick thing where he finds her, she hits the thing, and it's over. They had this tense, almost alien isolation-ish showdown. It's interesting as hell when the engineer, reads the book, runs his hand over the light, and when the girl is playing the violin, he reaches his hand out as if he's like, "Oh, humanity actually could be kind of interesting." It gives him more depth, and with Shaw taking the shot, her hiding with the axe. How the fuck do you cut that out? I mean, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
And it gave even more layers to the engineer, and it would have made that last 35 minutes even more epic.
Yeah, and I'm sure that the argument was for pacing, but like fucking cut some of the previous hour and 40 minutes of this movie. Like there's plenty of stuff you can cut and keep that in there because like it works so well.
It's 2 hours because it's what Fox wanted. He's so proud in both the prequels. Huh, look, boss man, I got 2 hours for you.
Yeah.
And under budget. Yeah.
Well,
I mean, that's the elephant in the room. I mean, I sort of like the Ridley Scott who created Alien.
Does he know in the room?
Yeah, that too.
Elephant in the chair.
The big
That's the joke I was going for.
Nice.
That was the joke that was sitting there.
Wow. Actually,
Thank you.
I think that's
Harry, you're promoted. There's a new partner on Shoulder. Perfect Organism. No, but now what was I going to say? The elephant in the room. The elephant in the room.
Peter
We're
Whalen.
going to complain about Ridley Scott.
Fox in the
Ridley
2
Whalen.
hours.
No, okay.
You were calling Ridley Scott an elephant? I don't know.
An Alien, when they go into the ship and they're walking to the ship, and when they're on the derelict, and when they're on the Nostromo, all the time, all that silence, all the patience. I think to your point, Dave, if they would have given the engineer a little bit more of that patience, a little bit more of that quiet, a little bit more of that mystery, as opposed to cutting for time, it would have been a little bit more effective, because I think we're all pretty much agreed that there's amazing things in this movie. I remember when I first saw it, and I've said this before, I think I saw it, did I see it 4 times in the theater? Maybe 3 or 4 times. I couldn't shake it. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I saw it with my then partner, and he couldn't stop thinking about it either. He was like, I can't get this movie out of my head, and I couldn't either. And I think that there's a masterpiece of a movie within it if it would have been given space to breathe. And but I do think, and this is a crazy idea, what if in the Hulu series it involves an engineer that had landed on the planet? That might be interesting.
That's not going to happen.
Where does he land?
What?
Cleveland.
On your mom.
The elephant in the chair. There she is.
Oh, wow.
But I mean, the thing is scary enough where that presence of, I mean, if they continued that mythology, and I'm sure it's not going to involve an engineer, but it's so iconic and amazing. Can you imagine, like, you're at some outpost somewhere on Earth somewhere, and you come out or whatever, or you go in and there's this thing standing, staring at you, and it's got an urn or whatever. It could be a great opportunity for, because Ridley Scott set it up that they were going to Earth. They maybe had been to Earth before. That was possibly Earth in the beginning. Not that this is a show about speculation about what the Hulu series is. All I'm saying is the engineer is amazing enough that it could have its own series as the monster, and also as the protagonist at the same time. It works on the same level as a xenomorph, but also it works as a character. That is so hard to do.
Yeah, and it's because its motives are so unclear. I mean, and there's a lot of things that come up in the previous episode that I'll get to in a second, where we were really kind of wrestling with like reasons why the engineers had done certain things, and I think it's unclear sometimes, even after talking about it for 2 hours, exactly why. And after having read the art book and having seen the documentary, so there's still a lot of unknowns. But I do think that there's a point I had before I was going to get to that stuff about engineers and about the Hulu series. And about why. Okay, so what I would love to see would be a series that is separate from this Hulu continuity, but something else, where we see like the experience of another species that the engineers have seeded somewhere. So again, something that's like us but dissimilar from us, something that has a different relationship with them, something that would allow for some world building within a tighter construct. Like the idea of the engineers coming back to Earth again to me is like does not. There's like no legs to that for me at all. Like I don't want to see that. But the idea, and of course, because we know that the Hulu series is going to work on, is going to have some Earth, bound elements to it. But the idea of like, I know people complain about the Covenant moment that we see, where we see, the Juggernaut, and we see the, this engineer-like people. Like, to me, like, I would love to see the story of those people. I think it'd be really cool to see what that was all about. And I've never been, again, maybe this is just my headcanon, but I've never for a second thought that they were engineers, because they clearly don't look like them. They have clothes and they have all this different shit. I think
there are some similarities, though.
There's like but there's similarities between us and the engineers also. Like
but they're white faces like the engineers, though. They're all like.
I thought it was them, and I thought it was just like some production limitations in a way, or something like along those lines make up like inconsistency, because because it seems to follow the theme all like of whatever deicide, like the thing goes back and kills God, and just like, look what I did to their makers. Isn't that a line? Doesn't he? Isn't it confirmed it's the engineers? It's their citadel or whatever. I know there's
it's obvious that it's them.
It's implied. Yeah, I don't know if there's a line that says that though.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I don't have a point.
I think David
it's gonna be my last words. Remind me to say that in 50 years. I'm just be like, I don't have a point. Lay me down to rest.
Yeah, I mean, it can be whatever you think it is, but to me, and the first time I saw Covenant, and the first 4 or 5 times I saw Covenant, like, they were just poorly designed engineers. And then I was thinking, well, the engineers have been elsewhere as well, and they've, probably even on their own planet, they've seeded different types of life. Obviously, they have, because of all the experimentation that was going on. So, my point being that I would love to see a series that would explore that idea.
Totally. 100%.
I think that would free up a lot of, we wouldn't have to have like a lone female or male protagonist with a fucking pulse rifle. We wouldn't have to worry about falling into all these traps.
Named Shipley.
Yeah, Shipley. Alan Shipley.
It has nothing to do with Alien. I don't know what you're talking about.
Taylor, let's go.
Because it would be cool to see something that like, is just fresh and different, and we all also, just like we worship at the altar of the Xenomorph, worship at the altar of Alien Isolation, which I think continues to prove itself to be one of the great achievements, not only in Alien, but in video games.
You guys all play that game? Does everybody play that game but me?
Jamie, fucking everybody.
Yes,
I know, I'm buying it. I know, I'm going to buy it, and we're going to do a live thing of me playing it. I'm going to be horrible.
We can all be playing it, yeah.
Oh my God. Already laughing at
We can all be in the med bay. Who can get out first?
Yeah, give me a week. I just can't wait, because Dan and I have been talking with Jamie about this, because he's like, guys, I'm gonna buy it. I'm gonna play it.
I'm gonna play it.
Last time
reaction video.
Staring at the ground.
Play it on easy.
Is there an
really
easy?
hard game? Yeah, there's an
yes. Play it on easy.
Okay.
So that way you can at least enjoy the story.
Oh my God! But
the game is difficult,
and it's like 7,000 hours long. It is such a long game.
Really?
But but every single moment of it is golden. There's nothing wrong.
It's cherishable. Yeah.
Huge.
Oh.
But the reason I'm bringing Isolation up, though, is to say that to me, there are weak points in Isolation, and one of them is that like it's just like so clearly following beats from the film, and it's so clearly like just it's very tied to it. And for most of the time, it works as a nostalgic thing, or it works as just like I'm just so in love with. I love the story of Isolation too. I'm not complaining about that, but like it's so clearly close to the story of Alien. And it kind of falls a little flat sometimes when it becomes too overt, And I think that like a series about the engineers from a different angle would be so liberating and fun from a storytelling standpoint.
Are there comics? Are there not engineers?
There are, but they did. It was in Life and Death, and
Fire and
Fire and Stone.
Fire and Stone, and then that was it. The shit hasn't been explored since, mostly because Covenant just kind of killed any type of Prometheus story. It's done. Unless, like Patrick said, and hopefully someone comes to Disney and says, hey, I have this idea for something. I mean, I think whatever we see with engineers, we've unfortunately seen.
It is a huge challenge, because it's like they're this character that invite this huge world and questions around them, but it's always got to somehow be tied to Alien. It kind of it goes back
And
to
you
that
don't
thing
need
of
to.
like
They stand on their own enough to. You don't
I
need to
agree.
connect it to. No, I agree completely.
Yeah.
I was always thinking, and this is just a thesis of mine, of like the derelict ship on LV-426. Like, what if that had crash landed sometime way before Prometheus even happened? Like, those things aren't connected, and like, why are they experimenting with the black goo? Like, what is it really that they're trying to make with it, and why does it kill everything in such a just a horrifying way? And what if like the eggs or something was actually like an old way of those cylinders or something like that? And what they actually find on LV-223 is maybe more of an advanced version of that, if that makes any sense, just from like the organic
Totally.
to the,
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah,
We don't know when
yeah,
that ship crashed.
yeah.
right. That's what I love. There's still that mystery there. Totally.
Exactly.
And in the Furious Gods, when they were going through the artwork and explaining kind of the idea of where they were trying to go with all these designs that like Carlos Wante and all these people were doing, was that they were trying to, in their words, I'm paraphrasing, like reverse engineer the xenomorph and be like, these are sort of the steps, the iterations that were leading up to it. And that's why it's, whatever, white or fleshy or more, it hadn't reached the perfect organism stage yet. That's why I was like, oh man, that protomorph thing could have been really cool. I mean, not protomorph, ultramorph.
Ultramorph.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Megatron
Yeah.
Megatron.
could have been awesome. But that's why, I was saying way earlier about how many people are on a film and how many decisions need to get made. It's like they're making a movie, and movies have actors and they have so many moving parts that it's like decisions like Fifield and what his final monster form ended up being, kind of like that was decided by them saying, well, we're liking what this actor's doing, we want his face to be more prominent, and we like sort of build it on top of him. But it just created this sort of question inconsistency of like, well, what happened to him? He got the stuff on his face, but he became this and da da da.
There's a lot of editing questions in this movie. Vogel has brought up a bunch of them. And
Yeah.
that, to me, Fifield has always been one that, like, and we're not here to
Oh,
talk
yeah.
about Sean Harris, but like that's always been a sticking point for me.
Oh yeah, we like gets
that-
back to the ship and all that, and it's like,
Yeah, there's a lot of like just logic inconsistencies there, but also just like they had this great design for his, beluga transitional stage, and then they just
Xeno Fifield.
it because which was really cool, and then they ditched it because of his performance, like you're saying, Madge. And he's a great actor, like I get that, but it just doesn't work because it's like it's a decision. See, this is what's tough, is that like when you're making something new, and Prometheus, for all of its flaws, is, I think, genuinely new, at least in terms of Alien. I think it's like there are story beats that are similar, but it really tries a lot of new things out. If you don't have everybody like 100% on board that vision, then a lot of the decisions, especially during post-production, that get made are decisions that like are not going to be synced up with the original film. The Ridley Scott and this is sort of a Jamie point, but the Ridley Scott that made Alien, like he was in the editing booth like for fucking hours going through it the entire time with the full
multiple
staff there,
shots, multiple
and going through
takes,
and really putting like all this time and like fighting to death to get final cut privileges for it, right? Like trying as hard as he could to get things he had to fight like hell to get a fourth act put in there. Like he like was playing every game he could with the studio heads. And this is a guy with a lot of capital. Like this is a guy, not just money, but like a guy who, although he'd only made one feature film, was like a really established commercial filmmaker, and Fox was eager to work with him, and he had to fight tooth and nail for months to get basic decisions across. The Ridley Scott that makes Prometheus is the Ridley Scott who is also about to move on to 6 other projects, right? And I don't think he rushed the filming of it. I don't think he rushed the pre-production of it. I think that he actually like really relished that experience. I think for him it was a labor of love. But I think that kind of as soon as it wrapped, he more or less was like ready to get on to other things, like The Counselor, like to other projects. And I think that was somewhat to the detriment of making a holistic artistic thing out of this, right? A lot of the deleted moments in this film, many of them have already come up, are things that to me would have like reinforced the artistic voice of Prometheus. Fifield should have been
100%.
scarier. And like the alternate version that we have of him is much more frightening and makes a lot more sense, I think, to me. But also, like, there was supposed to be more time between his infection and when he comes to the ship, and there were all of these other things they just kind of cut to make the film move better. And I think that Prometheus, and I think Covenant suffers from this too. You know, for all that I love of Covenant, I think that there's plenty of bones to pick with it, and that's one of them. I think it was made by a guy kind of in a hurry, and a guy who
Made by a company man.
right.
But
right.
I think
it's like the old Ridley Scott. Like he was like we said at the beginning. This whole Prometheus was made because of the engineers. This was it. He was obsessed with it.
Yeah.
He'd been waiting, X amount of years to talk about it, and then he made Prometheus. Then Covenant came around, and he's all these quotes of about the aliens is what they wanted. This all put it in. The old Ridley Scott would have said, "Fox, stick it up your arse. I want to do a film. I want to continue about the engineers, continue about this. If you don't like it, I am walking away. This is what I'm doing." This Ridley Scott said, "All right, we'll do something with the aliens. You know what? Fuck you. My new obsession is David. So there's your creation for the aliens. I'm making my movie now." He didn't stick to his guns. Like he completely, as original and new as Prometheus was, Covenant was a reboot, rehash thingy. He's not, the mind's there, the creative is there, but in terms of sticking to his guns, it's not there anymore.
I will say though, to Covenant's credit, it feels more methodical. It feels
yes,
slower.
absolutely.
It feels
100%.
like it's investing a little bit more into the characters. I
Yeah.
don't feel like it's boom, boom, planet, this, that. It just feels like I'm on a journey with these people. Even though some things probably in the last act or whatever that we all talked about before, not that we want to get into this, but I think Ridley Scott took some criticism, and you could feel it. You could feel that it feels more thematically and tonally in line with Alien, which for me is a better view. Like I enjoy it better than Prometheus, even though I think Prometheus is a better looking film.
Yeah, but the flaws in Prometheus, to me, what's interesting in comparing these two movies, which I don't want to do because we're here to talk about engineers and we got to wrap soon anyway, but just from a high level, to me, like there are flaws in both of these movies, 100%. The flaws in Prometheus, though, feel more unforgivable to me for some reasons. Totally. They feel like fundamental screenplay flaws that like just should not have made their way to the final cut of the movie. The flaws in Covenant to me are more like opinion. They're like, I was looking for this and it was too much of this, or it felt like it was a couple different ideas.
Playing the Prometheus theme song is really a forgivable act.
Yeah, like you can pick things to complain about and they're valid. It's fine. But with Prometheus, like there are things like I can't watch Prometheus with the sound on still all the way through. I just can't because I get too like frustrated by it. And it's weird because there's so much great in Prometheus. There's so much in it that's brilliant. But then the mistakes in it to me feel just like so giant. And it's interesting. Anyway, we're not here to talk about Prometheus.
Although Perry and I were talking earlier today or yesterday or something, and we're talking about the script for Prometheus, and we're like, how did Ridley Scott read this and think, oh, it's ready?
Yeah. I worship the movie, but the script, I really can't. Other than there's some scenes where the writing clicks and you see the, like you guys said, the magic of what they're trying to do, it shines. And at the times you're like, and I'm a big fan of these movies. Like, am I watching a Friday the 13th movie?
Yeah, it's so up and
down. Some of it just comes very awkward and very, just like you said, how did this get proved? I don't understand. It's as someone who loves the movie, it's like, come on.
Back to the engineers, though, I think it would have been interesting. I mean, in a different world for sure, but or a different, maybe if an engineer would have been on, what planet are they on? RJ6? What's the name of the planet they're on in Covenant?
RJ69.
Planet 4?
Or 69. Yeah, planet.
Is it a Planet 4 in Covenant?
Planet 4?
Planet 4?
Planet 4 play?
Planet 4 play, yeah.
Yeah,
it
Planet
has
4.
A name? I didn't even know.
I think it would have been even been interesting if they would have met an engineer as opposed to David. But I think they're that iconic. I want to see them. To your point, Patrick, I want to see them again. I hope we do see them again. I hope that there's some type of. I mean, I would even watch, as long as the effects were great, a great fan film starring an engineer. You know, that's how interested in these creatures.
So much more to explore with them.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
He kind of does work well though. Is just like we only, you know, we briefly see a few at the beginning. We see the head from the helmet, but we kind of really only meet one, and he's just big and imposing and becomes, you know, for lack of a better term, the villain. Do you want to see them as characters? Do you want to see them like interacting and be characters? Because it does work so well, and I think it leaves such an impression because it's just you know, big and scary.
I would watch a movie where they don't need to talk. They just need to. They don't seem like talkers. Right. They seem like they've evolved past talking. I know that there's a cut scene where David is interpreting what the engineer is saying, but honestly, if I imagine a film or a show or whatever about them, I don't ever think that we'll hear them talking. I think that removes some of the mystery. I don't know how it would happen. I'd have to really think about a good story, but they are so imposing and intimidating just as a presence. That's all they would really have to be. And they could be going about their ship or whatever they're doing, whatever the plot would be. And I would be glued to the screen. Glued to
it. Me too.
You know what a studio exec
They bring out their recorders. That's how they talk.
Oh God, I hated that.
Ultramorph, I'll do the fingering.
There's no better pitch for a network television show than a bunch of silent aliens from a prequel film that don't actually have dialogue and have no discernible motive walking around. It would be a hard sell, but would I love to see that movie or that show? Fucking yes, like sign me up for that. Just to clarify, so it is Planet 4 and Covenant, but they're on the way to Orgai 6. That's why it's
okay.
Yes.
But yeah, I think I going back for 1 second, to me, like we can pick apart issues with the prequels. We can pick apart issues with Prometheus all day long. But like something that I think I can't pick an issue with is the engineer. To me, that is something that shines so brightly from Prometheus for me. That's something that like I have complaints about as a part of our fandom canon, as a part of our conversations, as a part of our fan art. I loved those Fire and Stone and Life and Death comics. I thought they were super fascinating. I love that we have conversations about this totally new addition. I mean, it is totally new addition to the franchise. I love that it sets up moments in Covenant that to me are poetic. I love that they're still a part of that film, even though it's downplayed a lot. And I love how, even though we probably have seen the end of Ridley Scott's Alien journey, I would assume at this point, that journey continues very much in the hearts and the minds of all of us around the world who love these characters. And the engineers to me are exactly that. Like I will never forget how frightened I was of them. I'll never forget how beautiful I found them to be. I'll never forget the poetry of that opening sequence, which I still think is some of the best filmmaking in the whole entire franchise. And I'll never forget like what questions they made me ask about myself as a human, about my own notions of primacy and about, my own place in the universe, about how small or how huge I am and the insignificance or the significance of the things that I'm surrounded with. Like the engineers make us ask very deep questions of ourselves. And it's really hard to do that. It's really hard to do that in general, but it's really hard to do that also in genre filmmaking in a franchise that's existed for over 4 decades now. It's like hard to keep finding new questions to ask us. Blade Runner, of course, is a great example of a franchise that does that better than about anything else. But Alien is still doing that, for something that was, sort of thought of as a movie of the month or monster of the month B movie almost when it came out. It has gone on to become like a philosophical, bulwark of conversation around the world. And the engineers like revivified that. The engineers totally like kicked that into high drive and made us start asking new questions again. And of course, everybody was like, oh, it's not an Alien movie. It doesn't belong in Alien, like blah, 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 blah. And then here we are, almost a decade later. And like to us, this feels very much like Alien. This feels very much like part of the conversation. And I treasure that. I treasure the mystery. Perry, you were mentioning earlier about how, a lot of the things like the black goo, for example, like why does it have those effects on different creatures and different life forms? Like, why is it simultaneously a creative agent and a destructive agent? Like, why does it exist? Is it the Shoggoth in Lovecraft, or is it something else? Like, what does this represent? And those questions are not answered, and they're not answered probably primarily because they can't get another movie financed, and so he's not going to have a chance to answer those questions. And to that, I used to be so upset about that idea, but to me now, I'm thinking like that is great. Like, let's just like allow this thing to keep being made in our hearts for decades to come, and like let's like make up our own dreams about where it goes from here, and like let's keep it mysterious. It's okay. I think the engineers are fascinating and frightening and beautiful, and a really worthy addition to Alien for me.
I agree.
Yes.
I for one agree.
Hear ye.
I'll buy your Prometheus film. You know what?
I agree with those words.
They represent sort of an idea or a feeling that you can tap into when you're feeling a little, your mind's a little expanded, you're feeling a little like there's more to the universe than we know. Of course there is, but there, for me, it still hits where the scene before things start to get even really silly, even though they rush through the trip to LV-223, even though they could have maybe spent more time and made it feel like it was this long journey to get to our ancestors or whatever. But to think that you could get in a spaceship and go so far to the other end of, across galaxies and galaxies, and then in one pinpoint in just like, a single, tiny little point of this never-ending universe, there's a room you can go in where they go so far into the abyss, and then they get to a point where they walk into a room and there's a giant statue of a human head, and like that messed me up. And it's still a powerful scene for me of like, that's waiting out there so far. Like it was something like, what's the saying? To be great is to go on is to go far is to return, something like that. It's sort of, I don't know, it touches something where the mystery and that sort of adventure feeling of just like we're so far from home and we're getting answers we're seeing things we shouldn't see. That feeling, they definitely captured at least a good amount of that in the film, even though they captured some other funny things too. But yeah, in the canon of, and now they're in the canon of sci-fi films, and they're one of the most well-executed creatures, most thought-provoking, most argued over. And that's that's a funny thing when people are like, oh, love your haters, and if you don't have haters, you're not doing anything right. Like that can be kind of a funny, silly, sophomore, juvenile attitude, but they cause conversation, and they become the conversation. So yeah, they are what they are. They're here whether we like them or not, and I like them. So
well, that's probably a good place to wrap it, don't you think, Patrick?
Feels good to me, unless anybody's got any more anything else you want to throw in there.
In case anyone wants to follow that.
Yeah, I'll just say for the whole community, Alien fans and what have you, it's just it's all up to our interpretation, and we're literally seeing Ridley's painting of what our gods could be or who our creators are, and he's putting that out there to just let us sort of sit in those mysteries if we want to, and think of what levels or what better, clearer understanding, or maybe what muddles that, but to just appreciate that. And I just, that's why I love the engineers, because it just adds that extra dynamic and really can lead you down so many more rabbit holes of where the whole Alien franchise has come to be. So I just hope people will appreciate it, and maybe that does take some time. And now, who knows if we were having this conversation a year after the movie would have came out, if we would have, be at the same, talking the same way about it. But it's just great. Like I just think his films, just like Blade Runner and the science fiction films of those times are still so timeless. And yeah, I just love that. So I hope people can just keep loving it, and hopefully in another 10 years we're still doing Perfect Organism podcasts, and we have some crazy new
92.
understanding. Yeah.
Jamie will be in a nursing home, unfortunately.
I'll be Peter Wayland on the Prometheus.
Get my tea, David.
What? Actually, hang on. Before we throw it off the goal for final thoughts, I want to say, I don't know if anybody has watched the new Animaniacs series. I know this is about as out of left field as anything could be at the end. There's a very clear Covenant reference in a Pinky and the Brain segment in like the 5th episode of it, and Micah was the one that pointed out, she's like, this feels like the beginning of Covenant. And I was like, why the hell would Pinky and the Brain be spoofing Covenant on an Animaniacs episode? And then he's like, bring me the tea. And he goes, ambulate. And I'm like, holy shit.
Get real
way.
Sequence. Yeah.
I gotta
the idea is that Brain
watch that on Hulu immediately after this.
Yeah,
I'll check that out too.
I'm not sure which episode it is, but it's like 4 or 5. But Brain creates a synthetic version of himself. And
that's
thing
hilarious.
comes to life, and the first thing he has to do is ambulate. And I'm like, oh my god, this is fucking. And then like this, it like goes for a long time. So watch that if you're wondering whether or not these sequels have like made it into these prequels have made it into like broader consciousness, like it's in a fucking Animaniacs episode right now.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll kick it off
All right.
to close this out.
Go from Animaniacs to my closing thoughts on the engineers. Yeah, to all of you guys, I guess don't want to repeat what you guys said, but I'm with you. The engineers are fantastic. I hope we have not seen the last of them. I've had this long-standing guess that this stories will continue, just I don't know, comic books or a graphic novel or a novel, assuming there's enough interest in it where Disney goes, all right, go do something, because it's at least something that's a part of the Alien franchise that's different than the standard creatures and corporate and survivor stories or military stories we get. It'd be nice to have just a section with the Prometheus world where we're seeing the engineers, what they were about, other civilizations or whatever. Seeing their story, I think would be a different almost genre in the Alien genre, so to speak. I would just love to see it continue somehow, some way. I think they deserve it. I think they were too iconic to be kind of tossed aside in the sequel, and overall just kind of forgotten about. So I'm hoping, we get more of them.
Amen. I hope so too.
Agreed. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Thank you guys for being on the show. Dave, Perry, Mash, Patrick. We look forward to discussing this more as we continue our series on Prometheus.
Yeah, head over to Building Better Worlds, join the conversation. Quick heads up. Remember, our Patreon level is rising for the base access, but you'll be grandfathered in if you sign up now at the $2 rate for all the additional content. So if you've been on the fence, you have until, what the fuck is the date? March 15th or something? What is it?
March 1st.
March 1st? Okay, I don't know. I don't know what month it is. It's February right now. Okay,
that's true.
We're halfway
Feels
through
like
February.
2020.
This might actually, by the time you hear this, it might be too late. In which case,
that's true.
Actually, will be
because that's 3 weeks. It will be too late.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Well, it's $4. Sorry, you're fucked.
So, yeah, too late.
If you're not already, if you want more of my insanity, check out me and my motley crew at a Hive Mind Xenomorphing podcast. Check out the site, the Facebook page, everything for something a little different from Alien fandom.
The craft beer. What is it? The craft beer.
The craft brewery of Alien fandom.
Of Alien fandom.
And me, the Billy Butcher of Alien fandom.
Love it.
Please also check out the Perfect Organism OnlyFans. That's new.
That would be called Imperfect Organism / OnlyFans.
Imperfect Organism. Before we started fucking recording. Thank you guys. This is
all right. Thanks everybody.
Thanks you guys.
For more on Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast, please visit perfectorganism.com. Perfect Organism is available for listen or download through Podbean, iTunes, Google Play, TuneIn, and Spotify. If you'd like to support the show, please visit perfectorganism.com/support. Thank you.